Welcome to Nole Edge, the official podcast of the College of Arts and Sciences at Florida State University. I'm your host, Amy Walden, and today we welcome two guests, Virginia Lewis and Stephen Sansom, both of the FSU Department of Classics. Virginia and Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Good to be here.
So Virginia is an associate professor specializing in Greek literature with interests in Greek poetry and theories of place and space, and Stephen is an assistant professor specializing in early Greek poetry and its reception, especially epic and digital humanities. So on today's episode, we're diving into the work that both of you are doing in the department and also discussing the history of Homer's Odyssey ahead of the highly anticipated film being released this summer, which we're going to get into in just a bit. So Virginia, let's start with you. How did you first become interested in studying classics?
Yeah, so I became interested in classics actually when I was an English major as an undergraduate, and I came to classics through reception and through the Odyssey. So I took a course that was called Homer and Joyce, and we read Homer's Odyssey with a professor who studies the Odyssey and Joyce's Ulysses. And so it was a team-taught course. And so there was a professor who was a Ulysses scholar too. And it was really fantastic. And so this was in my sophomore year. And then in my junior year of college, I took Greek just to read the Odyssey. And then I learned that there are some other cool things to read in Greek too. But yeah, it's really exciting to get to talk to you about the Odyssey today because that is actually how I got interested in classics to begin with.
Where it all began, essentially.
Exactly, yeah.
And Stephen, same question. How did you first become interested in studying classics?
It might have started in ninth grade for me. We had to do a Greek mythology section in my ninth grade language arts class. And I remember really liking learning all the names of the gods and what they did, which is funny now because now I get to teach Greek mythology here at FSU. But then in college, I had a friend invite me to come study abroad if I could in Greece for a month. And I did. And I remember being kind of overwhelmed by hearing the stories and the places they took place, if it was the history of Thucydides or if it was in Athens and Greek tragedy. And it was through people inviting me in that got me into classics.
Getting to go there in person, that's pretty exciting. So both of you received some prestigious fellowships throughout your careers, including one that both of you have individually earned from Harvard University's Center for Hellenic Studies in Washington, D.C. What impact have fellowships like these had on your work, and what kinds of things have they enabled you to do? Virginia, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, fellowships are hugely important because they just give you the space to work on research projects. But I think even more than that, especially residential fellowships like the Center for Hellenic Studies, you get to be in a community of scholars who are thinking about really similar areas of research. And so, of course, we have our colleagues in the department, and we have a really vibrant, large classics department at FSU. So we're really lucky in that. But it's always great to meet new people and get fresh ideas. And for me, it was hugely important to complete a chunk of my first book while I was at the center, and I really benefited from conversations just daily with some of the other fellows there. They also have a fantastic library, and so it was really great to just be able to walk into the stacks and get whatever I wanted. I'll say, though, even though it's, the Harvard Center for Hellenic Studies and they have all these resources, I often did digital requests from FSU because our library is actually really fantastic, and the stuff would get there faster than it would from the Harvard's digitization.
Amazing.
So just a little shout out to FSU libraries.
Yes, FSU libraries is the best. All right, Stephen, same question for you.
Well, similarly, it was the people. You're in a new community with new scholars from all over the world that work on different aspects of the same thing, the ancient world. So it could be from a linguistic perspective, historical, philosophical, literary. And so you're working side by side with them every single day. And this allows you to get coffee and talk about things when you didn't expect to have lunch, to enjoy all the other sort of tangential things that happens when you're there, like going to lectures at local universities like Georgetown or the Dumbarton Oaks for Byzantine Studies and things like that. So yeah, being in a place with people doing the same thing is electric.
Yeah, there's so much to be said for that collaboration that you really just can't put a price on that. So we mentioned earlier in the podcast that there's a lot of buzz around a new movie hitting theaters this summer, which is Christopher Nolan's film, The Odyssey, based, of course, on the epic attributed to ancient Greek poet Homer. So before we talk about the film, let's talk about the original. For those unfamiliar with it, can you tell us a little bit of history about The Odyssey and why it's still being heavily studied by scholars today?
Sure. So it's funny to think about the history of the Odyssey because its origins are completely in the murky, like prehistory of oral poetry. So it comes out of who knows how many years, centuries of storytelling that eventually coalesce and get written down in the poem somehow like we have today. And then it has a history since then, like of being copied by scholars and eventually by like monks and being debated and maybe rearranged along the way, hard to tell. And then we read it in our schools today. So yeah, it's a strange thing to think about the history because it starts from such like a murky origin.
Yeah, absolutely. Virginia, anything to add to that?
I think Stephen hit the main points there. I would just say, even when we talk about the history of the Odyssey, are we talking about like which Odyssey, right? So there are, several new translations of the Odyssey, maybe most notably Emily Wilson and Daniel Mendelsohn has one that is brand new. And so when we think about the Odyssey, are we thinking about the Greek text? Well, even if we think about the Greek text, we have variations, we have different manuscripts. And then it was an oral poem for a long time before it was even written down. And whatever we think that process looked like exactly, the Odyssey means a lot of different things. And so I think Stephen did get to that too. But just to emphasize that it's a very like dynamic, living poem, and so I think maybe that segues into the movie too. To think about it
that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, I would think, for the filmmakers. So the trailer for the upcoming film already has 48 million views on YouTube, just to give a sense of the anticipation. So I'm so curious to know what your initial thoughts were when you heard this film was coming out. Stephen, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, we in our classics department teach a class on film adaptations of the ancient world. And so, we always want new things to engage with. So bring on new movies based on Homer or anything else from antiquity. It'll end up in our syllabus most likely, at least if I get to teach it. But then also, we've been burned by previous adaptations of Homer in particular. I mean, some people like Troy. Shots fired in some ways, but I found it kind of frustrating more than satisfying. However, the Odyssey's been getting some interesting treatment lately. Like there was the movie The Return that came out a couple years ago that personally I loved. I thought it did a fantastic job. Even though it was very unlike Homer in many ways, I still thought it was excellent. So when I heard that Christopher Nolan had his own version coming out, he goes big, and epic is big. It's supposed to, it doesn't have to be. The Return is kind of small in many ways, and I thought it was very successful at that. But the bigger, the better, and I think he might be the best we've got to do that. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I was really excited that Christopher Nolan is doing it. In particular, I absolutely agree, and I think I personally also enjoyed The Return. I think The Return is going to be harder to teach. And what I'm excited about with Christopher Nolan's Odyssey is, like you say, it's going to be big. It's going to be flashy. It's getting a lot of attention in a way that The Return didn't quite as much. And so I think what that does is it draws in more people and it gets the word about the Odyssey out to a broader audience, which is always what we want. And so we teach the film class, and I think that's a great place for it. I also will just plug a capstone seminar that I often teach, which is receptions of the Odyssey. And so I think this is going to be a really fun one to incorporate that into as well. So our capstone seminar, for more advanced undergraduate majors, but we do incorporate film to a certain extent already. And so I'm really excited to be able to hopefully incorporate this movie. I'm not teaching it next year, but maybe the year after.
So as of this recording, film isn't in theaters, but I want to talk about each of your expectations from an expert's perspective on what are some boxes that you're hoping the film checks as far as accuracy to the original work, Homer's Odyssey.
I actually don't necessarily need it to be accurate. I think every new version of the Odyssey is an interpretation to an extent, right? So even we think about translations and whether they're accurate or not, and like they're always going to be an interpretation. Like accurate can mean a million different things. And so we always are getting new translations. We are getting stories that are very closely trying to stay true to the original, but what does that even mean? Or things, as I mentioned, I got into Homer through Ulysses, which you could think about Joyce as translating the Odyssey. Is that a version of the Odyssey? Like, what is Ulysses doing? It's very complex, right? But it does make certain people, interested in Homer. So for me, I'm not so worried about the movie being true to any part of the Odyssey necessarily. In fact, in some ways where it departs, or even if it departs dramatically, that makes it interesting to talk about. So I think for me, I just hope it's a great movie that people love and it gets people to engage.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And Stephen?
I agree wholeheartedly that there is no one version of the Odyssey that can beat the Greek or compete with. It's a totally different thing. Also, it's a film, so it's a different genre, and so it has its own language that it can relate. There are a few things that I am eager to see what it does with. First off, when I saw the trailer and an actual Cyclops walked through the cave door, I was cheering in my seat, because this is one thing that other versions have shied away from. I mean, it's hard to incorporate the supernatural. Like, how do you do it? But if you do it in film. It's like your imagination alive on screen. It's like a dream. So in addition to looking for how they treat the gods and divine supernatural things in terms of visual effects and otherwise, I'm anticipating and eager to see how they treat Odysseus. This is one of the most complex characters in the literature that I work on. Famously described as so in the first line of the Odyssey, when he's called Polytropos or Polytropos, which means the person of many ways. And that's like all the different ways that he gets back home. It takes 10 years after a 10-year war. But it's also about his character. Like, he has to change who he is and have like numerous disguises. He has to fashion his words and how he tells stories in order to get home. And then when he gets home, things get really rough. And so thinking about Matt Damon as Odysseus is not the person, like, I don't think I would have picked Matt Damon for who would be the best person to play Odysseus originally, but I think he's a fantastic character because he can do Jason Bourne, burly action adventure stuff, but like the Odyssey has very little action adventure actually, and it has like sailing and ship action.
Maybe at the very end.
At the very end, there's a lot like packed into a brief moment at the end, and it's big too. But also like, he's also Will Hunting, like of Good Will Hunting, like this super intelligent character who has to use his wits to get home. So I'm wondering what Damon does with it.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see. And a lot of the YouTube comments were similar things about the casting and how they're going to play these different epic roles. So very excited to see how that all goes.
And I'm glad you raised the issue of genre too, because in a film, like, this can't be, so in 2019, we did a marathon reading of the Odyssey. This is before Stephen was here. But
yes, I remember that.
But it takes all day and into the night, right? So it takes a very long time. But film, we probably aren't going to have a 13-hour film or something. So it's like, what do you emphasize, right? And what do they choose in this shorter format to give a lot of screen time to? And so I think that'll be interesting to see.
I'm definitely going to have to catch up with each of you after you've seen the film and get your thoughts afterward too. Listeners, remember to return to this podcast episode and leave us your thoughts on the movie in the comments if you end up watching it. So switching gears, I'd love to know what projects or research each of you are working on currently as we head into the fall semester. Virginia, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm mostly working on my second book project, which is kind of tentatively titled Speech and Status in the Plays of Sophocles. So I'm looking at the ways that Sophocles sort of assigns language features to characters or particular statuses. So this can be gender, this could be elite or non-elite status, free, slave, that sort of thing. But then after kind of identifying some of these features, what I do is look at how he then subverts this. And so one of the main tensions I argue in the book that we see on stage, one of the ways he creates dramatic irony is to have these characters that actually don't fit into those categories. And it makes us kind of uneasy as we're watching the tragedy unfold. So, or reading the tragedy unfold in many cases now. So yeah, so that's the main project. And so I have some smaller projects that are related to that I'm working on this summer, but that's sort of the main thing that I'm thinking about these days.
Wonderful. Well, we'll definitely keep up with your work. And Stephen, same question.
I'll be finishing my first book. It's written, but now it's going through the reviews and publication stage of things. It's on Greek mythology, specifically how Zeus works in early Greek poetry as not just a ruler of the cosmos through thunderbolts and lightning, but how he uses things like media, like poetry, like voice, like heroes that he can create himself to do his will. So that's my big project. I'm also doing a little thing on the Odyssey. Telemachus, the son of Odysseus. The poem in some ways is as much about him as it is about his dad. He gets the first 4 books, basically, and he comes in at the end in a big way, too. And so I'm doing a little article about how his speech and the way he talks and the way the poet organizes his speech reflects his coming of age, how he either matures through the way he talks through the course of the epic, or how he just tries to negotiate like being the man of the house in which he is very much has like very little authority, but he wants it. And so he can use speech to get that, but how does he do it and how does the poetry reflect that? So that'll be a little piece I work on.
Awesome. I love hearing both of you guys talk about your work and seeing how much it excites you. It's very clear, and that's really cool to see. I'd love to know, what would your advice be for students who are interested in starting their journey into studying classics?
Read the Odyssey. Read it. Read it over and over again. Read it multiple translations or bits of pieces of your favorite scene. Read it in like Mendelssohn's translation or Williams' translation or Wilson's translation or Lattimore's. I mean, just read the Odyssey. Read anything that you like. And read it passionately.
Great advice. Virginia?
Yeah, I would say I'm very biased because, again, that advice resonates with my experience a lot. And so I think that's fantastic advice. I would also just extend that to, like, whatever got you interested in classics, read that, right? So if you're into history and, you maybe came into contact with some of these cool stories in Herodotus, read some more Herodotus. If you're into material culture, maybe look into one of our field schools in the summer where you can go to Italy and learn more about archaeology. But also, I would say, if you're really interested in classics, think about languages and think about maybe taking Latin or Greek. It sounds kind of overwhelming and it's not easy, but given the way we learn these days, and even when back in the dark ages when I was an undergraduate, learning Greek did something very different for me than other kinds of classes. You can't really cheat your way through Greek because, spoiler, this stuff has all been translated already, so you're not doing it to come up with the right answer exactly. You're doing it to learn a process and learn another system. And it really teaches you about how to study. So I think that was the thing that struck me the most when I started learning Greek. It caused me to have to be disciplined in my studying in a way that really carried over into all of my other courses. And so I would say if you're interested in it, like just come try it out. If you don't like it, you don't have to stay in it, but think about it.
Dip your toe in the water. Yeah. I mean, there's so many different directions that you can take your classic studies, it sounds like. So it's cool to see how it can be tailored.
And I should say, I'm also the supervisor of our Greek language program. So reach out to me if you are curious about Greek.
There you go. Perfect. So Stephen and Virginia, we end every podcast with our bowl of mystery questions. So please draw a question and you guys can both answer.
Okay. What is your go-to movie theater snack?
Ah, how perfect.
Okay.
Great. Do you got a good one?
I mean, it's going to be boring, so sorry.
If it's popcorn with extra butter, then we're hand-holding buddies.
I usually don't go for the extra butter.
All right,
you got to go for the extra butter.
Yeah.
So popcorn, extra butter.
Popcorn, extra butter, unless the butter tastes like citrus. I don't know, lately.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
The chemicals of the movie theater butter, it weirds me out. So
Strange.
just like the popcorn. But I love the popcorn.
Yeah. The biggest one that you can get for me. And then like the biggest root beer. That's my go-to.
And in fact, popcorn at our house has become so popular at our house that my daughter, when I was pregnant with her little brother, named him Popcorn. And that is still his name is Popcorn. Like at daycare, they call him Popcorn.
That is too funny. We'll bring popcorn in both forms to the theater this summer for the Odyssey. Virginia and Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today on Nole Edge. And listeners, make sure to read the Odyssey before you head to the theater this summer. And if you'd like to learn more about Virginia Lewis and Stephen Sansom's work in the Department of Classics, visit classics.fsu.edu. Thanks for tuning into Nole Edge. We'll catch you next time.